Welcome to the ROI of AI-Powered Testing, how AI-driven testing transforms efficiency, cost savings, and software quality, presented by Applitools. My name is Heather Versillo, and I will be your host today. I'm also joined by my colleague, Tim Hines, who's our product marketing lead here at the Applitools. Tim has worked in dev, QA, and ops tool development companies for over 10 years. He's also been a startup founder, taking on the roles of product owner, full stack developer, UX designer, automated and manual tester, and more.
First of all, I'm going to start off with why we need AI in testing and a little bit of what's going on right now that we see testing teams being affected by. So some of today's challenges with testing applications, testing modern applications particularly, you're seeing the huge volume of interfaces, states, scenarios that you need to verify, way more than you've had 10 years ago. So it's increasing exponentially sort of right now. Velocity, you're seeing all this frequency of new features, deployments, continuous deployments, especially with all the AI coding copilots, assistants that are out now. Most development teams have fully adopted, if not have been experimenting with copilots so far, and they're just producing a lot more code than they were even a couple of years ago. Complexity of UIs, definitely more complex and dynamic than ever. You've got a lot of things that are loading after the initial load, a lot of things that are changing. And then you've got environments that are being accessed on thousands of browsers, devices, screen sizes, all of these things that need to be tested. You've got multiple phones, you've got multiple tablets, multiple browsers, all going on at the same time. People are switching from one device to another and sort of expect a cohesive experience across those. So you've got to test that. And then just, limited resources that are happening. Yeah, so all of those things I just mentioned right here. Glad we haven't missed too much there. Thanks. And what's this result in? So traditional test automation, things that are written in Selenium, Cypress, Playwright now, even though this has definitely helped to keep pace with development, especially in the last few years, it's started to create this gap between all of the different things that we need to be testing and what we can actually cover from both a code perspective, scenarios, all of the different edge cases that'll pop up. These are This is definitely not the gap that you want to be having here. So we're seeing we're able to keep up just about right here with what we're able to do with our traditional test automation with a combination of manual testing, and we really need to be way higher than that over here. So how exactly can AI help us to do that? How do we close that gap a little bit? So the goal of AI-powered testing, first of all, we want to be able to attain near complete test coverage, both code test coverage and scenario test coverage. A lot of teams are barely getting a 20% coverage right now. We want to get that above 80% so that the only things that we're missing out on are sort of those cases that don't pop up very often or don't have a huge impact on the business itself. Then we want to lower the required skill set. What's that allow us to do? It allows us to sort of move the resources who are able to contribute to automated testing. So taking the things that used to require coding development skills and allowing other people on the team, manual testers, business analysts, sometimes marketing employees will be able to test this. For those who have responsibility for like A/B testing on websites, those who have responsibility for changing copy. A lot of marketing teams directly contribute to CMSs. So if you're testing a CMS, like WordPress or Contentful, you'd be able to allow them to contribute tests to the automated test suite as well. And then just reducing human intervention as much as possible. This doesn't mean replacing humans. This means allowing the AI to sort of handle a lot of the things that are cumbersome, a lot of the things that require a lot of tedious repetition. You don't want to waste a lot of your time just updating test cases, for example, or chasing down false positives and false negatives when they come through. AI should be able to handle a lot of those things and help to reduce the amount of time that you need to do that, so that you can do more strategic things. You can do more exploratory testing. You can work on your sort of overall test cases and the strategy that you're taking with your testing. So some of the categories of AI features that you're going to see in testing tools now, and there are a lot of testing tools, obviously, and Applitools is definitely one of those. And we've been doing AI for quite a while now. I think we're over 11 years of developing our own AI technology, and you're seeing a lot more that are popping up due to the proliferation of LLMs and the companies who are offering those, and the ease of integrating APIs into their testing tools. So, coding assistants, things like Copilot, a lot of those are able to help with generating test code. Also just helping out with fixing syntax and little things here and there that would require sort of a time suck and would require people to go and look up on Stack Overflow or some other place online to be able to figure out, hey, this is how I would actually go test this or assert this, or any of those things. Test case generators, we're seeing these sorts pop up. A lot of the times you can do this with ChatGPT or or Claude. You can just put in requirements from a new feature, and it'll generate test cases for that. It's not always the best thing it's not always the best results from those. Sometimes you're going to get good results, sometimes you're going to get bad results. Sort of need to check those. Test code generators are somewhat similar in that way. So we've had record and playback tools kind of for, I think we're well over 20 years that we've had record and playback tools, but actual test code generation using AI has been around for just a couple of years now. Some of the open source tools are starting to introduce this into their own code base. And then you've got NLP test creation. This is one thing we do at Applitools in one of our products, Autonomous, that allows us to be able to write out tests in plain English and actually maintain those test steps in plain English, so anyone can go and edit it. So this is part of what I was talking about, where you can have other team members contribute to the actual test cases for creation, for management, and fix anything that they need to if test fails or if test script breaks. Testing agents, this is fairly new. A lot of the OpenAI has released their agentic APIs recently, and starting to see a lot more testing agents at least being experimented with. Visual AI for testing, this is one thing that Applitools is very well known for. As I mentioned, 11 plus years of developing our own visual AI technology for the purpose of front-end testing. And that includes component testing, document testing, desktop apps, PDFs, any of those things that can be checked through a computer vision sort of technology. This is the type of visual AI that I'm talking about here. And then predictive AI for test cases, being able to know, hey, what's the most likely thing that someone's going to do? How do I create test cases that are going to cover not only the happy path, but also the things that pop up the most frequently from the analytics data that comes from the application. So which of these are trusted for testing today? So coding assistants, copilots, test case generators, test code generators, NLP test creation. All of these are sort of in a state right now where you need a human in the loop to be able to constantly check whether or not the things that are generated are accurate. Coding assistants, copilots, you see a lot of code that's created from those or edited by those, where it's a little bit of a back and forth conversation with the assistant to be able to get exactly what you need from it. That's going to happen with test case generators, test code generators to some extent, and then NLP test creation. Much easier to work with that than it is with some of the test code generators, because you don't really need to know the code all that well to be able to work with those. And the testing agents, that, as I mentioned, that's sort of in an experimental phase right now. I know a lot of companies that we've talked to who are in regulated spaces, who are in spaces where if something goes wrong, it's going to cost them a lot of money. They don't necessarily want to be deploying testing agents right now and trusting those with the technology being so new. So there's a lot of experimentation, a lot of testing with the testing agents going on. And it's sort of at a place right now where it's just not 100% ready for most production environments. But that being said, it is a very promising technology, and it is something that I think most teams should start experimenting with, at least within the next 6 months. Visual AI for testing and predictive AI for test cases. Now, these are older AI technologies that aren't built on LLMs. Visual AI is, we've obviously over 11 years using the computer vision, we're able to detect lots of things that weren't able to be caught just by doing a pixel by pixel comparison or using traditional test automation assertions, which would miss a lot of the things that visual AI is able to test. And some of the pixel by pixel comparisons often result in a lot of false positives, because little things like shifting pixels or shifting elements on a page, changes in browsers. If a new version of a browser comes out, the visual AI is able to take that into account rather than just starting to flag all of those and creating a lot of false positives that really erodes developer confidence in the visual testing side of things. So they feel like they need to write a lot more code to do those assertions. And predictive AI, that's also been around for quite a while now. And those are pretty well trusted, pretty reliable for generating test cases that are accurate and are the ones that are most effective and most often used by real users. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about how we use AI in the testing lifecycle. At Applitools, obviously, visual AI with our human vision modeling, we've got a bunch of algorithms that can be used. You can do something that's very strict. You can do something that handles dynamic layouts. You can even validate text data, whether it matches specific patterns or not. We do a lot of automated test maintenance, so that if a test script does break, or if one of the visual tests breaks, it can automatically repair itself and then repair itself across all of the permutations of browsers, devices, screen sizes that you're testing. So you only have to update it once. Same with the self-healing element locators. That's part of this sort of the test maintenance part of this. That contributes a lot to what AI can do for delivering ROI and saving a lot of time. We actually have a feature in Applitools Eyes that allows us to check how many tests have been updated with automated maintenance, so that you can see over time sort of all the time that you've saved by having tests automatically maintained. And now some of our newer features that are coming, that are in Applitools Autonomous. We've got automated test generation, automated test suite creation, and authoring tests in plain English. So using some of the generative AI, using LLMs to work in concert with our visual AI, with the automated test maintenance, to be able to help accelerate the test creation side of things, especially for like functional testing, which is something that we were only previously doing with visual AI. So now it's more of a NLP recorder working together and actually running test steps with the AI, rather than generating code on the back end that's executed through that code and relies on locators that would be generated. Doesn't rely on that at all. Relies on which test steps are laid out in plain English and maintained in plain English, and then the AI will interpret those and actually use that to find the elements on the page. So what we recommend typically is to use a combination of AI assistance and some autonomous testing. The way we accomplish that is sort of with these custom flow tests of being able to do functional data, visual assertions, API calls across multiple browsers and devices. This is what I was talking about with writing those test steps in plain English and recording those, using the AI to actually work through all of the flows that you would do with a traditional test automation tool, to be able to do all of the assertions and to parameterize variables and all the things that you would normally do with Selenium, Cypress, Playwright, any other Appium, any of those tools. And then autonomous testing for our side of things, the way we go about this is to use our visual AI for full page test that allows us to cover a lot of the other pages in the application that may not be your most important flows through your application. These are things where you can do checks with the visual AI, and it can find bugs that are both functional and visual bugs across all of your browsers and devices, so that you can get coverage, but you don't necessarily want to focus on all of those. So it'll help to catch things that maybe aren't on the radar and probably wouldn't be prioritized by like a predictive AI, for example. Okay, now let's get into sort of the ROI of this. How do we know if we're getting more value over the testing we're doing today, your traditional automated testing? One, so the things that you're looking to do with testing with AI, you want to be able to accelerate release cycles, right? Speed up development with faster, more reliable testing. The AI should be able to make things more reliable, be able to fix things as it's executing those tests. Some of the automated maintenance that I was talking about, that should make the entire test suite more reliable and allow you to release quicker, fewer false positives, fewer false negatives, so things aren't slipping through to production. And then dev time on testing, right now, we've got this stat from GitHub, or GitLab, I should say, that developers spend more than 30% of their time testing and fixing defects. So they could be spending that time better actually building things and not having to go and create the tests themselves after the fact. Like things like unit tests can be generated after building things now, and that'll help to drive this number down and accelerate release cycles. Reducing risk, minimizing the chance of bugs slipping through. So this is stuff that I was talking about, the false negatives. Reducing escape defects. Right now, automated testing can reduce the number of escape defects by 30%, as Capgemini found in one of their recent world quality reports. And AI can reduce it by even more than that. This is one of those things where the visual AI that I was talking about with Applitools is able to catch a lot of bugs that maybe you would miss. Things like elements that wouldn't be created by even a code generator can be caught with visual AI. And if you just use a pixel-to-pixel comparison or a DOM comparison for your visual testing, those can produce so many false positives that you'll be sorting through all of those and miss a lot of the false negatives that'll come through. And ultimately, we want to lower testing costs, not by reducing staff, but by reducing the amount of time for manual testing and being able to reuse some of those manual tests for automated tests. So this is about giving time back to the development team and allowing others on the team to be able to contribute to automated testing. And some of the visual AI can also do some of the testing of things that a human would normally need to see on the screen. It can at least identify all of those places where you would need to go and do manual testing after the fact. But you're always going to need some amount of manual testing. You're always going to need a human in the loop to be able to validate that that is correct. AI is not perfect, but it definitely is helping and making things quicker, easier to identify those, so you're not having to go and test every little thing. So automated testing costs, obviously, organizations can save up to 40% on their testing costs with automation, as found by Deloitte. Again, AI can kick that number up way higher than this. Enhancing customer satisfaction. So this is one of those things that's a little bit fluffy. Hard numbers around customer satisfaction. You've got things like NPS and CSAT that could be used for that. But if you're an e-commerce store, for example, you would see increased sales. You would see fewer people dropping off. You would see fewer cart abandonments, things like searching. Anytime there would be issues with that, your customer satisfaction would drop, and it's pretty easy to switch to another site and find the same things on those. So this definitely will have an impact on what on the bottom line of the business. But CX is by CX, customer experience, is something that's always a little bit difficult to manage, and AI with testing now, especially with visual AI. I know I'm harping on that a little bit, but it's a lot easier to identify defects whenever you've got the AI pointing out exactly where things are going wrong, so you don't have to worry about all the smaller parts, smaller test cases slipping through. All right, so how do we actually go about calculating this? There are 4 areas where we look at actually being able to calculate time savings and customer satisfaction, all of those things that will put it into hard numbers for you. So a couple of things that are coming in here: when you have new UI changes, you need to go through creation of those test cases. You need to actually be able to create the test code, or if you're using an NLP, create those test steps there, doing the actual validation that those things are functioning the way they should be, they look the way they should be, the performance is good there, and then the execution. How is that going to be running on a continuous basis? Is it going to cover all of the browsers and devices that we need? Can AI help out there to accelerate the actual execution of things, so that the automated tests aren't running for hours and hours and hours? They're able to run under an hour and do a full end-to-end test within that time. And then, of course, test maintenance. How do you make sure that the test cases aren't breaking, that the test scripts aren't breaking every single time that you're running them? And it's easy for AI to help you repair those test scripts as you're every time you run those and something changes in it, and then pushing those out to customers. So how do we actually go about calculating this? What inputs do we need? I am going to pull up a little calculator that we use here at Applitools and walk you through some of the inputs that we usually look at, some of the benchmark numbers. Now, obviously, you can put your own numbers in here. You could change the benchmark numbers. If you find that, hey, maybe this isn't accurate for the way that we do things. And yeah, like, for example, number of screens and pages do your application have. These are more of examples of what you might have on your average application. So you go through here, number of pages, screens and apps, screens and pages in the apps. That's something you want to be measuring, because that is going to affect the amount of savings that you would get from it, both in test creation, test maintenance, execution, all of the number of test cases that you need to validate, number of users and states of the data sets the application have. That's absolutely going to multiply with whatever how would I say that? It's going to have a huge impact on the way that you would do that calculation. We also look at how many browsers and devices do you need to test. Some people usually have about 4, 5. We've seen 20, 30 in some cases. Some customers need to test browsers and devices that are a little bit obscure. Companies like Netflix, for example, need to test multiple TVs. They need to test on tablets. They need to test on phones. They need to test all kinds of different sizes and make sure that their applications are running well on those. Things like testing on how the app looks on Roku versus Amazon Fire sticks, and all of those things need to be taken into account. So you may have fewer, you may have more. You'd use your sort of benchmarks the way that you would go about actually calculating which ones you need. How many different versions do you need to test back? This comes up pretty often with browsers, or especially with like government applications. A lot of people use older versions and can't update to the latest version of the app, or of the browser, I should say. So you need to be able to test all of those, calculate the numbers that you're going to have there. How many total UI components and states do you have? That's going to have a huge impact. This is one of the biggest ones that's going to have an impact on the amount of savings that you're going to have, both on test creation and maintenance side of things. How many total languages do you have? This definitely comes up with anyone who's going to be selling to multiple demographics across the globe. Some may just be working in English, and some may be working French, Spanish, Portuguese, Arabic. You may be spreading across all of these different languages, and things like visual AI and LLMs are pretty good now at being able to translate those very quickly. So hey, this text that I wrote out in English is the same in these languages here, and I can make those without triggering a bunch of false positives. Especially with visual testing, that'll have a huge impact. A lot of languages have significantly longer number of characters after you run the translation. I know usually the one that gets me is translating like English to German. The German sentences usually end up way longer, cause a lot of page shifts. So you need to be able to calculate the effect that that's going to have. And then test setup. How many UIs or end-to-end tests does your project have? How many new UI or end-to-end tests do you create per week? Those numbers definitely going to be important to keep track of. How often do you run your test suite? This has to do with not only execution, but number of times that you need to make updates to test scripts. Then how many developers do you have on the team? What % of time is dedicated to writing tests, maintaining tests, debugging issues, and average QA engineer compensation? This one, super important and usually very individualized for the company. So we've got an average of $50 per hour there. And that'll help you to calculate the actual dollar amount savings that are coming from all of the time savings that you'll be calculating here. So then we break it down, as I mentioned, into creating, validating, executing, and analyzing. So things like adding automated coverage for all of the important pages in the application under tests, creating end-to-end tests to cover application functionality, creating tests for different deployments. You're going to measure those out in, these are actually going to be calculated from the inputs that we had over here in the setup phase. And that will allow you to see how many hours you're saving per week. And then that would be your baseline for the testing tools you'd be using, and then look at what the time savings would be with AI. So you may want to run a few experiments with just average, how much time does it take to do this with your existing test suite? How much time does it take to do this with AI tools that you're evaluating? Some of these numbers here are benchmarks that we use for our own tools at Applitools. So you would see, reducing things from 90 hours per week down to 11.7 using the total number of minutes multiplied by, things like building reliable tests using English language and NLP versus actually building reliable tests with scripts and record and playback. So we're doing the comparison between those two, calculating the number of hours that we have there, and then eventually we're going to tag that with the dollar amount. The benchmark that we were using is $50 an hour before that, so these will all be translated into dollar amounts at the end. Things for validation, we're looking at like functionality of UI, visual correctness, accessibility, localized languages. We've got all of the numbers that you'd be looking at for manually checking those. You may be doing some automated checks on these, so you would change those numbers for what you would expect to have. And again, running experiments on that, running sort of baseline checks, and then looking at what that actually does with the AI tool that you'd be evaluating, and using that to sort of extrapolate out what the overall impact should be for your team, for your organization from there. Same with execution. This one is significantly easier to measure most of the time, because all you have to do is run your test suite as it is today, run your test suite with an AI tool, and compare the time that it takes to run the sort of the same test, at least the same number of test cases over all the browser devices and screen size that you want to do. So that one is actually pretty easy to calculate. Doesn't have much to do with actual developer time or intervention there. So this one is much, much more about time savings. And then finally, analysis and maintenance would be included in this. So this is stuff like root cause analysis that AI would be able to help out with, and updating test scripts. So checking each test for failures, finding what changed, updating, writing new tests for the coverage, measure those, and then compare with the AI tool. So this usually comes out to something like this, and we'd be able to see the amount of time saved. And you can create charts, graphs that have all of this in it. And then if you want to present to your upper management team about sending a proposal on, hey, we want to adopt some new tools, you could present it this way, where this is what we use at Applitools. So it's got a lot of our own language about our tools in there that sort of explain what we'd be doing. But if you're using things like copilots, test code generators, you would include some description there so that we know that your team understands what you're doing, and then the amount of savings that you're getting from that. So you could basically take all of the things that you would be calculating from test creation, UI validation, test execution, and test maintenance, show that, and then show the bottom line, the amount of hours you'd be saving, and the amount overall that you'd be saving by implementing AI testing tools. And with that, I'm going to open things up for questions. Heather?
Hey, Tim, that was great. Thank you so much. So we have been receiving a few questions, and I know a question that we commonly get is around coding assistance. So how are you seeing coding assistance impact test velocity and bugs, like whether they're increasing or decreasing from AI-generated code?
Yeah, great question. So there are some mixed stats that you'll see out there, from studies that are done by GitHub. They're suggesting that bugs that are coming from AI-generated code are fewer than what was produced previously. And there are also studies that suggest that AI coding assistants have a smaller impact on things like code velocity and can actually increase bugs. This is probably going to be individualized for your team. You probably want to be measuring that as you're experimenting with coding assistants. This is one of those things where your results may vary depending on which coding assistant you're using, which models are being used, and also just what kind of training you're giving to your development team to be able to use those copilots effectively. Definitely has a huge impact on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate that. And then a question that we have on the ROI calculator more specifically, well, we've been getting a few questions about if people can have access to this ROI calculator. So I think that's part one, to kind of combine some of those questions. But then subset of that, is this ROI calculator applicable for native Android and iOS?
Yeah, so first step, I will say this, the calculator that we have here is specific to Applitools products. So if you are working with one of our account executives or with one of our CSMs, you can request that you get access to this and you're able to calculate the savings that you would have there. It's also fairly easy to create one on your own. And it's not the most difficult thing. The two most important things that you need to measure there is the average cost of whoever's creating tests today, whether that be like an SDET or a developer or manual testers, how much time they're spending on those, and then calculating all of those individual metrics that I was talking about there and comparing them to the AI. So if you want to do this with different tools that aren't Applitools, using copilots or test code generators or test case generators, just use those metrics and think about time savings and how that has impact on the actual on the average cost of whoever's going to be creating those tests and running those tests. And then for the second question here, yeah, native Android or iOS, it shouldn't be any different between those. Different devices might have a different number of states or a different screen sizes depending on what you're using, and you would just use that to run to figure out what your metrics are for those. And then test execution is another one of those. So whether or not you're using a device lab or if you're using emulators or simulators, those are going to affect the execution time as well.
Yeah, that's true. Apart, I think, from some of those more tangible metrics, though, sometimes people do want to contribute to the ROI, or take into account, rather, I'd say, some more intangible factors like customer satisfaction. Is there a way, or I guess how might you go about considering things like customer satisfaction?
Yeah, so there are definitely metrics for that. There are things like Net Promoter Score, CSAT, customer satisfaction metric. These are things where you're presenting customers or prospects, whoever's visiting your site or using your application. Ask them, like, Net Promoter is how likely are you to recommend this to a friend or colleague. The question itself is depending on what metrics your organization is actually using for that. But you could also see things in your analytics as far as like drop-offs, the amount of time they spend in the application, hotspots where they're having trouble. A lot of these can be done with log analysis tools to help you sort of pinpoint exactly where things are going wrong with your actual users. And that can be used as a proxy for customer satisfaction.
Yeah, I appreciate that a lot. I think that's something that people like to take into consideration, but don't always know how.
Yeah, and it's always not a direct impact on the hard metrics that you can do with testing, or necessarily the ROI that you can show to your management team, but is definitely something that has an impact on the bottom line for the company.
Right. Okay, so we do have a couple of product-specific questions, it looks like. So I'm going to move over to handle a couple of those real fast. And then I think we'll probably move back out to a little higher level. So the first one in this Q&A section here is, does Applitools support automation for SAP GUI as well?
So the way that I believe we handle SAP GUI would be through doing our image comparison. So with Applitools Eyes, it would be very similar to the way that we handle sort of the PDFs or desktop applications. Not necessarily something that would be done the way that we do web applications, but the visual AI can still be used to test those.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. And then the next question is about test executions. This one's in the chat, so I can't pull it to stage to show everyone.
Sure.
But this said, generally AI tools have limited test executions per month. So this is a two-part question. The first, how many test executions are allowed per month? And secondly, is Applitools an on-prem tool?
Yeah, so for the first part of that, test executions per month is not something that we use for calculation for our pricing. Concurrency is, and number of pages and components. So that is not part of the calculation for that. For execution itself, I mean, if you're using Applitools Eyes, this can be done through your own test execution infrastructure, or you can use our ultra-fast grid and execution cloud to emulate, simulate devices, and runs it very, very quickly compared to some of the other execution options, especially like device labs, where it might take a long time to go through that. This is like 1/10 of the amount of time that takes. But yeah, as far as pricing goes, not a factor per month. It's a factor of concurrency, pages, and components.
Mm-hmm.
And then could you repeat the second part of that question?
Sure. Let me jump back over there real fast. So the second part was, is Applitools an on-prem tool?
Applitools is not an on-prem tool, but you can run dedicated infrastructure. You can run it on your own cloud. So it's not something that you would run like locally on a dev machine, but it is something that you could run on your own infrastructure. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That's for Applitools eyes. Applitools Autonomous does not run on your own infrastructure. That's done as more of like a SaaS application.
Mm-hmm. All right, and then I'm jumping back over to our Q&A here. Show this one. So with continuous integration and deployment and shorter sprints leading to compromised testing time, how should the return on investment for testing be integrated into sprint planning and test plan creation?
Yeah, that's that's a very complicated thing to
Yes.
consider. Just overall, this is one of those that's going to be different from team to team. I think, how many tests you're running per week. I was showing that sort of in the calculator. Is going to have an impact on the ROI that you're going to be getting back from these AI tools. Specifically, like test creation and test maintenance, if devs are pushing new features during the week rather than waiting for the end of a sprint to run the test, they're doing it sort of on a continuous basis in more of like a DevOps environment. You're going to get more savings over time from both the test creation and the test maintenance aspects of the AI there. So that should be thought of as part of this whole thing. And then obviously, everyone advocates for testing earlier and more often, but it's not always possible to do that. Devs, even with AI coding assistants, often leave it till late. So very important to be able to create tests and maintain tests quickly.
Yeah, and I think in addition to those kind of traditional-ish or more tangible ROI metrics, even just considering risk management, that will help with your ROI if you're focusing on those features that have the highest impact and potential cost if defects occur.
Yeah, and the test case generators that would be coming from like Jira tickets or whatever you're using for to track the requirements for new features, those will definitely help to create those, at least not start from a blank slate for those, and sort of help you to at least generate some automated test code by using like a recorder and an NLP that is easier to maintain and easier to contribute to test execution. That was part of the whole manual testers contributing to test execution part of things that I was discussing.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, and in the interest of time, we're going to answer one last question, then call it a day here. All right. So does Applitools have training for their models? For example, test case generators in the customer environment, or directly can the customer work, they can use it for like visual AI without further training? So I think they're asking to explain how we tweak our models, ensure they're staying up to date and accurate.
Yeah, so we've got, I can back up a bit and show sort of our overall how we use AI. There we go. So the important thing to know here is the visual AI right out of the box. This is something that we've been training for years. We've been taking into account bugs that customers have run into, sort of edge case things that the visual AI wasn't able to catch years ago, that is now able to catch or ignore. So it's a lot fewer false positives, and we're able to catch more things, so fewer false negatives that go through it. But those aren't necessarily, they're not trained on customer data itself. We've been using sort of anonymized interfaces to do this, and it's allowed us to be able to iterate over years. This isn't going to be trained on customer data, though, so we don't need to. There are some visual AI tools that are out there that require you to have so many tests pass before the sort of the machine learning behind the visual AI is able to actually function properly. We don't need that. It works out of the box. For the LLM part of it, especially in autonomous, that is one where we have developed a deterministic LLM in-house, and we use that in combination with other LLM, other API, your OpenAI, Anthropic. We use those to help interpret what a user is writing and then translate that into language that our deterministic LLM runs. And what's really important about that is that the LLM isn't trained, our LLM isn't trained on customer data. So you can use it out of the box and it'll work really well for that. But the importance of it is so that it runs the tests consistently, so that you don't have to worry about it interpreting the test steps that you have written out or that you've recorded there, and it'll run those every single time the same way as if it were test code, but it's interpreting what's actually on the page, so it's not as flaky as using like element locators.
Mm-hmm. Then, to wrap up, at Applitools, our AI-powered end-to-end testing platform makes it simple for teams of all skill levels, whether they code or not, to create, execute, and maintain powerful automated tests that streamline critical test flows. So if you're already an Applitools customer, you can reach out to your account team to see how to calculate your current ROI and explore how the intelligent testing platform and autonomous can help boost that even more. And if you're not yet an Applitools customer, you can see firsthand how autonomous can help your team work smarter rather than harder without compromising on quality by signing up for a free trial. Again, thank you, Tim, and thank you everyone for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon.